In this session, I want to talk a little bit about high school and some of the differences about teaching your high school students. And I want to give you two perspectives as I go through this session. First of all, I want to give you the perspective of you're teaching your high school student along with all of your other younger children. And then I want to give the perspective of you only have a high school student or maybe two high school students. And so it might look a little bit different for you. And sometimes even by this point in life, mom is working maybe a part-time job or a full-time job, and so the high school student is doing some of it on his own. And so I just want to cover these perspectives as I go through this session and let you see a little bit about how you could use Homeschooling Torah to do high school. There are some things that I think all high school students really need to know, and this is not the subject matter, but just general skills. All high school students really need to know how to read quickly. At this point, reading should not be a hard thing. It should be pretty much second nature, and you want your student to be able to read very quickly. If your student is struggling with this area, I think you need to have them reading more, because the more we read, the more we improve in speed. Now, there are some tips on like learning to speed read and so on that you could get into. You could just Google that or look on YouTube and some simple tips on learning to read more quickly, but that's not really what I'm going for. I just want them to be able to read quickly and not be struggling with sounding out words. If they're having trouble, let's just say you had a high school student that was still struggling with sounding out words, take them back to level 3 of our curriculum with phonics and let them go through sounding out syllables and see if that improves it a little bit. But generally, the other thing I would do is have them read aloud from the Bible. And you can check where they're having trouble and help them learn to tackle those words. Then just have them read a lot. That helps a lot. Secondly, I think that high school students need to be able to comprehend bigger ideas and harder things. The vocabulary that they should be able to understand is a lot bigger, and you need to have taught them dictionary skills. If you haven't taught them dictionary skills or they never learned them in public school, then have a dictionary handy and teach them how to use it, even if it's just on their phone and they're looking up, dictionary.com. You also want your children in high school ages to be able to understand difficult arguments. And the way you're going to do that is by exposing them to the Bible and talk hard theology with them. Like, there's no theology topic off the table at this point. You can discuss anything with them and see if they can defend their answers from the Bible. That's got to be the bottom line, is it has to be able to be defended with scripture, not just with your own opinion. Secondly, expose them to a lot of history, because in history you're going to be exposed to the ideas of people over all of the centuries, and you have to grapple with those ideas. You want them, for that reason, to be able to read what we call primary sources. So they're not just reading books about history, but they're actually going to the writings of people who lived at that time and reading what they have to say. Now, those are assigned for you in our history curriculum. Every single week we have a section that is just for high school students, and most of those are primary sources, and a lot of them you can get online for no charge whatsoever. You might want to have a device or a computer that your student can use for history, so that you can use ebooks and so on, not have to purchase all of these books. But you can check with your local librarian for hard copies if you need to. Help them again with the vocabulary. Sometimes I've found when reading a primary source, if I don't understand what they're saying, because they just speak such a different way than we do, I read it out loud and try to put expression to it. Like, sometimes I try to read something in a British accent if I don't understand it, and suddenly it actually makes sense. That's just a little tip I use, and you can help your kids with that. And again, have a dictionary handy. If you own a book, or if you have printed out something from the internet and you look up a vocabulary word, then write the definition with a pencil next to it. If you don't own the book and you're just trying to read from someone else's copy, like a library book, then have a 3x5 card handy, and I like to put it up and down, so the 3 is across this way and the 5 down, and I like to write the vocabulary words and use it as a bookmark in the book, and that really helps. If it's a Kindle book or an ebook, then oftentimes those come with a built-in dictionary, and you can just hold your thumb over the word and it will define it for you. That helps. I don't know that we learn it quite as well as when we write it on a card, so I still recommend that method. I also want my children to learn to research, to look up the answers to questions that they're having. And you can do this, start out, but when you're having the discussion and you want to know the answer to something, and I find with my kids it often starts with health or with a practical question that they might have around the house. Look up things, but teach them how to use academic sources, like as academic search engine instead of just the popular search engine results. Using search engines such as DuckDuckGo or some of the other ones that I have linked down for you in your handout. That way they're not just getting the party line. Definitely I would not have them looking it up on ChatGPT. That's not going to give them a good accurate answer, not necessarily. How are we going to know if it is? But I would have them having to actually work for it, looking it up in something that's a little bit more difficult. Again, keep a dictionary handy and look up the definition of hard words, and that will help. But sometimes I start with something simple like a popular blog post or a news source that, like CNN or MSN News. Or I might start with Wikipedia, but I definitely don't want to stop there. I don't want to take just their word for it. The Bible does tell us that a man's answer seems right to him until another one comes and gives his opinion. And so you want to make sure that they're getting more than one source, and one of those should probably be an expert, a literal expert, not someone that's just writing something that's popular. Help them to write. Writing is a very important skill for high school students because at this age, they're not just taking in information like they were in the middle years, but they're learning how to communicate what they know to others. That is probably the pinnacle of what a high school student needs to know. So writing is generally the way that we do that. They can also take speech class at Homeschooling Torah, but writing needs to be the normal one. So their writing is going to take the form of essays and paragraphs that describe what they've learned that day, and then later in the year, every year, you really should have them writing research papers. And I like using composition books and spiral notebooks for this, so that all of their writing is in one spot. I also, again though, some of the writing is going to be notebooking pages, and I definitely still do have my high school students write and on their notebooking page assignments. Help your student learn to take notes. We talked about that in another session today. We talked about that in our language arts video today, and it's very important that your student does learn to take notes, and that's going to be an important life skill. Not only will it help them in their writing assignments, but it also helps them learn to think and help them remember things, and it's going to help them as they attend a Sabbath fellowship the rest of their life, and in all sorts of ways. Taking notes is super important. They need to learn how to memorize things, and just because they're not younger children notoriously, I don't know if that's the word, younger children generally have an easier time memorizing things than high school students do, but that doesn't mean that you still don't have them memorizing at this age. And they need to learn to study for a test. How do you have them take a test? Well, they aren't always scheduled in our curriculum, but you could just say, on Friday, I'm going to give you a test and I want you to be ready for it. And you might give them a couple hints about what is on the test at first when they're learning to take a test. But then when Friday comes, say, I want you to take out some notebook paper and I want you to number it to 5. I usually just do 5, maybe 10 if you really feel like there's a lot of information. And then you, Mom, look through what they learned that week in history or science and pick out 5 facts that you think are very important for a high school student to know. And then just ask them to write in the answers. It's as simple as that. You can store that away, but it's not so much that the test is important as learning to study for a test. I think that's an important skill for high school students. And lastly, I think that high school students really need to know how to manage their own time. We talked earlier today about setting up a schedule for an ideal homeschooling day, but by the time your students are in high school, you really want them to be taking ownership of their schedule. You might have them run it by you, make sure that there aren't any things that are going to conflict on your two schedules, but generally speaking, they need to learn how to look at the clock, how to be on time, how to set up their day in a certain order and routine, and that's something you can help them with, but you want to develop that skill in them. So for that reason, you might want to have some of your high school students do their work independently, and I'm going to give you some ideas on how to do homeschooling Torah independently. I don't want you to get the idea that I think all high school students should do all of their work independently, because again, the Bible is pretty clear that discussion is important with your children. But again, as they become closer to adulthood at age 20, I think it is important for them to learn to do some things on their own. And if so you might want to set up your day so that the high school students can do some things independently. And here is how I would do each of the subjects, even though, again, I wouldn't necessarily choose to do it this way unless I had to for work circumstances. Sometimes in our home, I do work at Homeschooling Torah, and it's a lot of work. And so sometimes we have our kids do some of the days we do together, and some of them I say, today guys, I'm really busy. I have this big project that I have to get done, or here's a deadline. And so I want you to do school on your own today, and then we'll set it up like this. So here's some ideas. For Torah, I'm going to give them each either a composition book or a spiral notebook, like one of these. And let me get this out real quick. And then I'm going to give them each their own Foundations of Torah book. And the reason I'm going to do that is in the Torah book, there are study questions. And I'm going to have them take their composition book and write, the name of the Torah portion and day one, and then I'm going to have them answer each of those questions. Now, here's something I do for high school students. When they have to write the answer to something, I make them do it in a complete sentence. A complete sentence has a subject, a verb, and makes sense. Okay? So for instance, it says, let me do, all right, let's say we're studying Leviticus 11, and the question says, why can't we eat a rabbit? Well, I'm going to have them write in the answer. The answer is because it chews the cud, but it doesn't have a split hoof. And so I could have them just say, because it chews the cud but doesn't have a split hoof. But that's later, if I were to look back at those notes, I might not know what I'm talking about. So I want them to write in a complete sentence, we cannot eat a rabbit because while it chews the cud, it does not have a split foot. So it's going to have a complete sentence there as an answer. And that's what you should expect from your high school student. So in Bible, I would have them write out all the answers in there, in their composition book or spiral notebook. And I would have them also make sure that they've memorized the memory verse, that they've filled out everything that's in the journal. So for copy work, your students can do copy work on their own. By high school age, I'm expecting my students to copy the Torah. We have a complete schedule on the Homeschooling Torah website, but basically you want them to be copying between 8 and 10 verses a day. That schedule will generally have them through the entire Torah in those 4 years of high school. I also want them to be reading the Bible on their own, and there are two schedules that I think are really great for high school students. One of them is the entire Old Testament in chronological order, and when they're doing that, I like them to have maps handy, and I like them to have a list of maybe the kings of Israel, the sons of Israel, all the different things, the people that they meet. I want them to be writing down in a journal and taking notes of who's king and what happens at that time. Especially, that's why I like them to read it in chronological order, because it helps them to put everything in an order, and I want them to take notes. I also like having them in high school reading the entire Bible in 1 year, or the entire Old Testament or the entire New Testament. And as they read, I like them to take their Bible and over each chapter next to, let's say I'm in Acts. Now my Bible already has things written in like ministering at Corinth, but I would like my students, maybe I'd get them a Bible that didn't have that. I would like them to have a chapter heading for every single chapter. What's in that chapter? And you could again do that in a book like this so that you have a heading for every single chapter of the Bible. It's so nice in life to have a good sense of what is where in the Bible. And one of the best ways to do that is to put a chapter heading over every chapter. Of course, at high school, you're going to have them do advanced math. We don't offer that at Homeschooling Torah. So on our website, we have some companies that we do recommend. There are many, many more. I'm not able to keep up with every single one of them. So find something that works for your child. And if it doesn't work for them, don't be hesitant to switch, okay? I know it's a lot of money to buy math curriculum, but it needs to work for your child, especially if it's too difficult for you to tutor them and they're going to need to understand it. So check that they're comprehending it, that they're getting their answers correct. And if it's not working for them, switch to a new company. If they're not at all ready for advanced math when they are in high school, I recommend that you do our 4th through 8th grade arithmetic. And just because it says 4th grade doesn't mean that it's not hard enough that, say, at 7th or 8th grade level math. couldn't do it. And so if your high school student is not ready for algebra and geometry, or they're really struggling, then stop and put them back. And it's okay. It's okay. It's better that they learn it well. For grammar, what I do, especially if my kids are going to do grammar independently of me, is I'm showing you the printed book right here. I would not use a printed book here. I would use the Homeschooling Torah printed lessons, but this is the one I have out here, so I wanted to show you. And I would take the written out scripted lessons, and I would give those to my high school student. But when it comes to the answer keys, I would not give them those. And sometimes you'll have a lesson where the page has both the scripted lesson and the answer key, and I would just take my scissors and cut that right off of there and keep that for myself. But don't let them see the answers. I can use that when I'm grading, and then they can use the student pages to actually do the work. So I'm basically giving them the scripted things, and they're going to read it. If they struggle reading it and comprehending it, what did I say earlier about comprehending things? Read it out loud. Reading out loud helps us comprehend things better than reading it silently. So if the student's saying, I just don't get what I'm supposed to do, say, okay, start again at the top of the page. I want you to read out loud. And you can sit with them, but don't help too much. See if reading out loud gets them to understand it. I would make sure that during high school, my students are doing a year of grammar, a year of writing, and probably a year of writing prompts. And they're also doing literature, which we have available to you on the Homeschooling Torah membership. You can do either 1 year, 2 years, or 3 years. 3 years is probably what most colleges are going to expect. So the lessons for that are on the website. And we also have clubs that you can do those with. They should also have speech and typing. And I feel like I'm forgetting something. They should have to write a research paper and a literary research paper in the literature classes. That's what's normal and what colleges are going to expect. For their writing assignments, they can either put them in a composition notebook like this, or they can take the typing classes on Homeschooling Torah and then type their lessons and store all of their typing on the cloud, and you can check it on the cloud, and that will help them learn to use technology as well, which is important. For history, there are some topics that are generally recognized as important in high school. And for here, I'm going to just talk about if you only have high school students. If you have younger students, you can be doing history all the years together, and your student's going to cover everything needed. It doesn't have to be in the high school years. You're going to still be covering it. But as they get older towards high school, you might want to start giving them the high school assignments that we do give them. So every week in our history curriculum, we have assignments just for high school. This one, it says you're reading a book called The Crusades by Anthony West, and then they're going to write a 3 to 5 page paper summarizing the history of the Crusades. So that's an extra assignment. It's really important for them to be doing at high school. So generally speaking, if you are just going to use Homeschooling Torah for the high school years and you haven't used anything else, you're going to need to combine some of the years. So this is year 3. I have found that the students can usually go very quickly through year 1. Have them, if they need to, do several weeks of lessons every week and get through it. And they don't have to do all the fluff assignments. Just give them a couple and just have them mostly reading and answering the discussion questions in their spiral notebook or their composition book. My students, I've had high school students go through year 3 and 4 at that faster pace as well, and it works just fine. And then have them make sure that they do some of the high school as well, so that they are learning how to do primary sources. They're also probably going to need a year of American history and some American government and economics, and we do offer that at Homeschooling Torah. And the government class is a hefty class. They're doing government and economics, and I expect it to take a full 180 days to get through it. And yet your children really will understand government, and it's, besides required in almost all the 50 states, it's really good. I think you'll enjoy it. For the science, for Homeschooling Torah, if you're going to be able to use Homeschooling Torah for all 4 years, then you can use a science that's on our website. If not, I recommend that you just do science year 1, call it a year of general science, and then you could use a different curriculum for your biology, chemistry, and physics. My children have just used Homeschooling Torah, and I think that is adequate, but you might have to get some help with your transcript. We have that in some other sessions. I'll put some links below. Make sure that your students can access your Homeschooling Torah membership so that they can see all of the YouTubes and get to all of the handy links quickly and easily without having to type in all those links on their device. That's a pain. Have them access the website along with your account so that they can get straight to the handy links. In our family, one of the things we like to do for the handy links is our family has our own little private Discord chat. And so all of my teenagers are on Discord with me, and we have a channel that's called Schoolwork. And I go on to the Homeschooling Torah website and I grab the handy links for science and I put them in the Discord chat. And that way they can watch the YouTube videos on their own time, and they can just get right to them again without having to type them in. Your high school students should be, like I said earlier, doing a lot of reading. In addition to everything I've already said, I have my high school students read a chapter a day of a fiction book and a chapter a day of a nonfiction book. Sometimes those fiction books are the ones that are scheduled right here in history. Sometimes my kids have already heard those stories because they've been around a while in our home, and so I allow them to choose a fiction book, but they have to run it by me. It can't have magic, it can't have witchcraft, it can't have any kind of content that would not be appropriate according to the Torah. So that's something you can check some of the links that I have in your handout for some ideas on good books. But again, the history books, they definitely have fiction in them, so that might be adequate for you. I have my students choose some electives. Like in high school, it's expected that they get 2 years of a foreign language. I like Hebrew, but my kids have chosen many other subjects or many other languages as well, such as Spanish, German, Russian, Korean, Norwegian. So those are the, let me think, that's all 5 of them. Spanish, Russian, German, Korean, Norwegian, and then we've all had some Hebrew. And so those, it's fun. It's fun. They enjoy it. And some of the apps that you can use, I really like Pimsleur. Mango is pretty good. It's okay. I like Pimsleur better. And then getting them just a good grammar book so that they can understand the grammar of the language. Again, it's just like our grammar. Learn the sentence patterns, learn how to modify things. You've got your plural and your singular and your male and your female often in languages. What are your articles? It's just like our grammar. So sometimes as they are learning grammar with Homeschooling Torah, they can ask themselves, wait a second, how would I do that in the language that I've chosen to study as an elective? Other electives include important life skills, music, art. Health is required in many states. We have a health website at Homeschooling Torah. It's under PE. Day 5 of our PE curriculum is a health curriculum that would be adequate for high school. If they go through all of those topics, they're going to have a good understanding, especially of nutrition. So those are some topics that are really important for high school. Like I've said a couple times, we do have clubs at Homeschooling Torah, and they're meant specifically for high school students, and they can get to know other Torah families, other Torah teenagers, and they can make friendships. I really enjoy watching them do that. And I enjoy working with the teenagers every week, and my husband does too. At the moment, we have speech, we have literature, and we have writing. We've done different kinds of writing classes every year, and the kids can join this year after year throughout high school, and I do recommend that they do. And so I recommend those high school clubs for fellowship, and also just because we can help fine-tune some of their speech skills. It's easier to do a speech with a class that you can give a speech to. So that's pretty fun. Mom, be sure that you're checking their work, that you're recording their grades. But basically, high school is a time that you can help them go on their own and develop some of that independence. Hopefully I've answered all your questions today. If you have any questions I haven't covered, feel free to reach out to us. We'd be happy to help.